Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this session. My name's Mark. Just to give you a brief bit of background that's relevant for this session, where we're going to talk about the migration from Disability Living Allowance to Personal Independence Payment. I sat on the first tier tribunal panel for about 4 years. That's part of the judiciary, where they hear appeals from disabled people who've been refused disability living allowance, personal independence payment, or attendance allowance. So that's what I bring to this table. So let's a brief bit of history. I'm sure most of you will know disability living allowance has been around since it was legislated for in 1992. And it's still relevant for all people under the age of 16. So personal independence payment, which we'll talk about in a minute, doesn't apply for under 16-year-olds. It applies for people from the age of 17 through to the state retirement age, at which point, if you're not in receipt of personal independence payment, then you would apply for attendance allowance. And attendance allowance is a subject, I guess, for another day. So personal independence payment was passed through Parliament in 2012 and 2013. I guess it's reasonable to say that the policy reasons behind its introduction was that there was a substantial increase in the number of people that were receiving disability living allowance. There was a bit of an unpleasant campaign by some of the tabloids to do something about it. And so personal independence payment came along. So those are very briefly the policy reasons behind it. Now let's talk about migration for a bit. When you turn 16 to 17, if you were in receipt of disability living allowance, then you will be invited by the Department for Work and Pensions to apply for personal independence payment. So that's your migration route. And if you were receiving disability living allowance as a working age adult, you will similarly be invited. Most have been invited to transfer. There aren't that many left, but there are some left, and the government is behind schedule on that. They had hoped to migrate everyone a good 3 or 4 years ago, but that hasn't happened. So there will be some of you watching, I've no doubt, that are still on disability living allowance. My advice to you is don't make an approach to the department. Wait until they make an approach to you. You must take up that invitation, because you will lose your disability living allowance if you don't go on to the migratory path. So how does personal independence payment work? It's similar in a way to disability living allowance. The form is long. You need to fill that form in, and you need to accompany it with an awful lot of documentation. And I would advise you very strongly to include within what you send back to the department, to include a diary. So keep a diary for about a week, which shows your daily activities, what you do, and how your impairment might restrict you, what help you need, what appliances you need, and so on. One of the other traps that people can fall into, and I'll talk about each of the indicators within personal independence payment in a minute, is the mobility component. Let's take that as an example. So you may well be able to walk, let's say, 100 yards, which would put you out of scope for the mobility component. However, the effect of walking those 100 yards may mean that you have to go to bed for the rest of the day because you're exhausted. So there's a key measure within actually disability living allowance as well as personal independence payment, which is whether you can do any of the activities repeatedly, reliably, and safely. So if you could walk 100 yards but couldn't do it again for a couple of days because it would exhaust you so much, you couldn't do it repeatedly. If you're likely to trip and fall and hurt yourself, you open yourself to risk, so you can't do it safely or reliably. So really important to think about that when you're filling the form in for each of the indicators. Let me tell you what the rates are for personal independence payment. The daily living component, which is effectively the care component of disability living allowance, is split into 2 rates. One is standard, and you get standard if you score between 8 and 12 points. And we'll talk about the points in a minute. So standard and enhanced are the rates for daily living. The standard rate is £60 a week, and the enhanced rate, you can see I'm looking to my left to check I'm telling you the right figures. The enhanced rate is £89.60 a week. The mobility component is similarly split into two. One is standard, which is £23.70 a week, and the enhanced rate is £62.55 a week. So those are the rates for personal independence payment. If the department makes an award, it will make an award over a period of time, which is nearly always measured in a number of years. And typically the average is between 2 and 4 years. Under Disability Living Allowance, some recipients had lifetime awards. That's very unusual with personal independence payment. So the activities, let's look at daily living first. Preparing food is the first one. So can you cook? Can you use a cooker? Can you use a microwave? Each of the activities, and we're accompanying this presentation with a slide that will take you to all of those activities in detail. Each of them have about 5 components which score gradually higher. So if I take you through preparing food in more detail, it will give you an idea. I can't take you through every single one because we'd be here for the rest of the day, but just as an example for preparing food, if you can prepare a simple meal unaided, you would get no points. If you can't cook a simple meal using a conventional cooker, but you're able to do it using a microwave, you would score 2 points. If you need an aid or appliance, you would also score 2 points. And you can see again, I'm checking that I'm telling you the right information. If you need prompting, so let's say you have a mental health issue and you need reminding to cook a meal, you would score 2 points again. But if you need supervision or assistance to, say, make sure you don't burn yourself, then you would score 4 points. And if you simply can't cook or prepare any type of food, you would score 8 points. And remember, 8 points is actually the threshold to get the standard rate. 12 points, remember, for the enhanced rate. So we've talked about preparing food. The next one is taking nutrition, which is literally about the ability to eat. And again, there are 5 indicators, which I'll leave you to check when you have the additional resource, which takes you to all of the indicators. The third one is managing therapy or monitoring a health condition. Now that's about the ability to take medicine or to have a particular type of therapy. So let's say you had to use a Dosette box, which is a box like this, where pills are put in for every day of the week. So typically a nurse might come and fill that box for you every week. That's using an aid. That is an aid, and that would score you points. Also, you might need reminding to take your medication, and that would score you points too. Moving on, the next one is washing and bathing. That's a pretty obvious one. So if you need a stool to have a shower, or if you need somebody to bathe you or shower you, then those would be point scoring activities. Important, by the way, always never to express your best day. Some people with fluctuating conditions will think, oh, today I was all right, everything went well, but tomorrow might be a disaster and the day after might be a disaster. So here's another tip to remember. If for more than half of the time, for more than 50% of the time, you can't remember to take your medicine, as an example, then that would score you points. So there's a 50% rule, and that's why it's important to keep a diary. Okay, so we talked about washing and bathing. The next one is managing the toilet or incontinence. And again, it will be fairly obvious, I'm sure, to you what that will involve. And the next is dressing and undressing. So just because you might find dressing difficult and you wear clothes that are fastened by Velcro rather than buttons, that effectively is an aid as well. If you have to sit on the bed to put your socks on, that is an aid as well. So dressing and undressing, that's an activity. And the next one is important, I think, for us, communicating verbally. So if you need an interpreter with you, that's communication support and would immediately score you 4 points. Okay, reading and understanding signs, symbols and words, that's quite relevant to some people with a learning disability. So if I can't read and understand signs, then I would score a substantial number of points under that indicator. Moving on, engaging with other people face to face. So if you need, let's say, for argument's sake, a support worker with you, when you engage with friends, family, strangers, then that's a point scoring activity as well. And finally, on daily living, making budgeting decisions. So as an example, I recently represented somebody who has Tourette syndrome, and one of the issues that affected her was that she would go on crazy spending patterns during the middle of the night and know nothing about it the following day. And then a few days later, half a dozen pairs of shoes would arrive. That would score her points because she's having problems budgeting and spending money. Okay, so that brings us to the end of daily living. I'm going to talk a little bit about mobility now. So mobility is slightly easier, although it's harder to get than it was under Disability Living Allowance. And the activities under mobility are split literally into two. One is around planning and following journeys, which is much about the ability to find your way around, if you like. And the other, which is much more relevant to what it was under Disability Living Allowance, is moving around. So let's go for the maximum. The maximum number of points you can score is 12. And you need 12 or more for the enhanced rate. You will get 12 or more for mobility if you can move more than a metre, but less than 20 metres, aided or unaided, or you simply can't walk at all. So let's say you're a full-time wheelchair user, you would score 12 points. You can score 8 points, which would get you the lower rate, or sorry, the standard rate they call it now. And that's given for the ability to walk more than 20 metres, but not more than 50 metres. Okay, so two components for mobility, planning and following a journey. And I'll give you the example for 12 points there. You can't follow the route of a familiar journey without another person, an assistance dog, or an orientation aid. Okay, that would score you 12 points, the maximum, which would get you the enhanced rate of mobility. So that's how PIP works. So you will fill the form in. You'll accompany it with perhaps anything ranging from school reports through to care plan reports, occupational therapy reports, the diary that I mentioned earlier. Take a copy of it and it will go to the Department for Work and Pensions. My understanding is they're still offering a form filling service, so you can do it over the phone. But I think it's far better if you actually do it yourself. And it would be advisable if you can get somebody like me who knows the system to sit with you and fill the form in. So off it goes to the Department for Work and Pensions. In a certain amount of time, bear with me, I'm going to stop for a minute while I have a drink. So within a few weeks or months, the department will write back to you and they will almost certainly invite you to an assessment. I say almost certainly, it's very, very rare for people to be either awarded or refused without an assessment. Now, the assessments are conducted by firms contracted by the Department for Work and Pensions, which are Atos and Capita. Sometimes they will be held in your home if you ask. If you don't ask, you're more likely to be sent to a centre that's relatively near you. It should have accessible parking. You should ask for reasonable adjustments if you want them or need them. The assessment will take about an hour maximum, really, and is usually conducted by a nurse, sometimes a doctor, sometimes even a paramedic. Very important to take somebody with you. They're not there to speak on your behalf, but they're there to, what's the word I'm looking for? Look after you sounds a bit patronizing, but I guess you know what I'm trying to say. Very important. The other thing that they act as is a witness. So they know exactly what's been said during the meeting. So that assessment will then be keyed up and sent back to the department and one of the officials at the department will make a decision. So then you'll receive a letter which will tell you how many points you've scored on each of the activities and whether or not you have been given an award, and if you have, for how long it will be in place. If you're unhappy with the decision, no, let's do the good side first. If you're happy with the decision, that's it, finished, dusted. Your award will last until the period given has expired, and at that point you would reapply for another period of time. If you're unhappy with the decision, then you must write to the Department for Work and Pensions and ask for what's called a mandatory reconsideration. You can't go for an appeal without doing that first. So a different officer will look at the refusal or the low award or the low period of time, which you can also appeal, and will make a final decision. And you'll receive that one in the post as well. Once you've received that, if you're still unhappy, then you ask for an appeal and you will go to the tribunal. Now, the queue for the tribunal is very long. It varies geographically, actually, to be fair. Sometimes it's not quite so bad. I can remember seeing appeals that were at least 9 months old. And when you go to the tribunal, it's very important to try and get a welfare rights advisor to go with you. Now, that would be an organisation that's run by disabled people, or the Citizens Advice Bureau, or an impairment-specific charity like, say, the MS Society, any of those. 75% of people who go to tribunal with representation are successful. That's a really important statistic to know. Now, perhaps for another session, I'll talk you through the tribunal process, because that's another 20 minutes. But from me, I hope I've helped you get your head around personal independence payment. If any of you watching this have got any questions, please come back to us and I'll try my best to field them by email. Meanwhile, thanks for watching and good luck.
Empowering Deaf People Through Technology by Migrate. I'm Michael, that specialises in supporting people with hearing loss, and I want to quickly talk about exciting products that can help deaf people to work or study independently. Streamer, an automatic captioning platform that instantly produces spoken words in real time on a compatible web browser for people who struggle with listening during lectures, online learning, remote working, and video conferencing with secure private rooms. Sign Glasses allows you to have live sign language interpreted overlay on top of the lecture rooms or office environment through a pair of smart glasses. Could be used for training to be a plumber, mechanic, or doing computer repairs with your choice of interpreters accessed from anywhere in the UK. Duo, a face-to-face communicator creating a barriers-free communication between deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impairment and hearing individuals, sending real-time text back and forth with ease to have a spontaneous conversation instantly anywhere without barriers. These speech-see microphones are intelligently designed to filter speech and noise to capture conversation that's transcribed into text on multiple devices. Each speaker has a unique identification shown in different colors, making conversations more accessible when engaging group conversation. A wireless headset from Wear and Hear for people with mild to moderate hearing loss to engage in conversations, talk on mobile, and hear TV, videos, or music streamed directly to your ears. There are preset settings for indoors, outdoor, in crowds, and live music when using the app. Think Labs, a digital stethoscope that's been designed for people with hearing loss that increases the bass levels to amplify the sound of heartbeats. Could this stethoscope inspire deaf people to become vets, paramedics, doctor, or a nurse? Hope you find these products interesting, and you're welcome to get in touch for further information.